Hello, folks, and welcome back to Chris Wyatt Africa. From central Pennsylvania, this is Chris reporting on events, this time, once again, in South Africa. Well, South Africa's Secretary General of the South African Communist Party, Blade Nzimande, who's been in that position since 1998, is also under the ruling ANC government of Cyril Ramaphosa, the Minister for Higher Education, in other words, universities, responsible for that. In the midst of the pandemic last year, when people were concerned about other things like dying and preventing the spread of a terrible scourge, as we're told it is, Blade Nzimande's higher education ministry was focused on eliminating Afrikaans. What am I talking about? Well, in a policy directive issued on the 30th of October in 2020, the term indigenous was removed from the application of Afrikaans as a language. Now, South Africa has 11 official languages, and that includes Afrikaans, a truly South African language that grew up from a multi-ethnic mix of peoples in the Western Cape, which you can see there behind me, looking down from Table Mountain, Signal Hill, Robben Island off in the distance, and the central business district of Cape Town. But Afrikaans got its origins from here, with a baseline of Dutch from 17th century and a mixture of Malay, Portuguese, Indonesian, Khoi, and San languages, all mixed together, with the root basis being Dutch, of course. South Africa's first truly indigenous language to develop since the Khoi and San arrived as many as 50,000 years ago. Of course, they've developed new languages since then. Of course, new language we've talked about previously in this channel has been around for about 25,000 years. But it's been thousands of years since South Africa developed its own language, just organically. And Afrikaans grew out of this interaction of peoples from Africa, from Indonesia and the Malay Peninsula, as well as Europeans, mixing and creating this language over time. It's the world's newest language and the only language in the world with a monument dedicated to it. Well, Blade Nzimande decided it's no longer indigenous. But the problem is that that's a word that is tinged with controversy to begin with. What exactly is indigenous? Well, it typically is not defined by most folks particularly effectively, although pre-colonial tends to play a role, and culture and language and self-identification are all accepted for it. The United Nations, for its part, does not identify the term officially. They do, however, give some key elements of it, such as self-identification as indigenous peoples, historical continuity with pre-colonial and or pre-settler societies, a strong link to territories and surrounding natural resources, distinct social, economic, or political systems, distinct language, culture, and beliefs form non-dominant groups of society, resolved to maintain and reproduce their ancestral environments and systems as distinctive peoples and communities. In this policy paper that appeared in late 2020, Nzimande signed this, and it said languages that have their heritage roots in Africa, referred to as African languages in literature and some policy documents, and that belong to the Southern Bantu language family, where Bantu is used purely as a linguistic term. An indigenous language is language that is native to a region or country and spoken by indigenous people. So what exactly does indigenous mean? Here's the problem with this, ladies and gentlemen. Under this application, Blade Nzimande and his ministry are completely wrong. Bantu languages are not pre-colonial. While Europeans arrived in permanent settlement in Southern Africa in 1652, the Bantu peoples only crossed the Limpopo River, entering modern South Africa 1,500 to 1,600 years ago, arriving as colonizers. Now, a lot of South Africans take issue with this, but facts are facts. That's the reality. And by colonization, what I mean is they introduced an alien political system upon an indigenous or pre-existing pre-colonial peoples. Those were the Khoi and the San groups living in Southern Africa, who were marginalized and pushed out of what was Zimbabwe as the Bantu-speaking peoples moved down the Rift Valley and down into Southern Africa. They pushed into South Africa, further marginalizing these groups and pushing them to the margins. Now, we like to hear the famous story that, well, Black South Africans got along in harmony with the Khoi and San, but that's simply not the truth. There are groups of Bantu who did interact, intermarry, and have strong influences from those groups, such as the Xhosa people in the Eastern Cape and now Western Cape areas. That group did act very well, by and large, with the Khoi and San, but other Bantu groups marginalized and pushed them to the limits and into the Kalahari and the Karoo. So, listening to Blade Nzimande claim that Bantu languages are indigenous to South Africa is historically inaccurate, and it's just simply disingenuous and dishonest. They're not. They're no less colonizers than European languages. And Afrikaans is not Dutch. Afrikaans is its own language, which grew up and matured in South Africa. Therefore, it is an indigenous language, and it meets all the precepts for identifying an indigenous group. Certainly amongst colored South Africans and Khoi and San who speak it. Well, folks, Blade Nzimande opens his mouth and inserts his foot and attacks Afrikaans. For their part, the opposition Democratic Alliance claimed that he hates Afrikaans. I don't know that he hates Afrikaans, but certainly he's going out of its way to misrepresent the language. For instance, he said Afrikaans should and must be located in democratic South Africa and be rescued from a white right-wing agenda. What white right-wing agenda are we talking about? This is ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous. This all comes about now because the Constitutional Court has ordered the University of South Africa, UNISA, to finally restore Afrikaans as a language medium of instruction in UNISA. They removed it a few years ago unconstitutionally, and now the Supreme Court of Appeals has upheld that it must be reinstalled, and the Constitutional Court has just recently, September 2021, upheld that decision. We'll see what happens. The Constitutional Court gave UNISA until the start of the 2023 academic year to reverse its language policy, which did away with teaching and learning in Afrikaans. The Democratic Alliance has filed a complaint with the South African Human Rights Commission about Blade Nzimande and his ministry's decision to remove Afrikaans as an indigenous language. Good luck with that. The South African Human Rights Commission seems more focused on bogus investigations of Springbok players over fraudulent claims by drunken people who start fights, accusing Springbok players of racism, when in fact they ignore racism and the racially motivated torture, dismemberment, and murder of people on farms in rural areas across South Africa. Anyway, folks, there you go. Blade Nzimande opens mouth, inserts foot in his attack on Afrikaans, which was largely moving through without anybody noticing it. But now the courts are beginning to defend constitutionally guaranteed rights in South Africa, and people are taking notice. If you're not a subscriber to Chris Wyatt Africa, hey, smash that button right down there and become a subscriber. Appreciate your support for the channel. God bless. Thank you very much, and have a lovely day.